Salutations, crustaceans. I'm Lobster, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the bass that tried to do it all. This is the Line 6 Variax 700 bass. Let's check it out. This is the Variax 700 bass from Line 6 guitars. Line 6 is best known for their amps and all-in-one effects pedals. I believe that they reached their peak in the mid-2000s. They had a whole guitar and bass lineup, several pedals, as well as a bunch of different amps for guitar. And those amps had a bunch of different modelers and effects built into them, and they were pretty popular for a while. With all that stuff, Line 6 was a big innovator when it came to the modeling of certain tones and sounds. Instead of buying an expensive old P bass, why not model the sound on a bass like this? So there is no conventional pickup here. Instead, what we have is the whole Line 6 Variax electronic system that has 24 preset sounds in there. On top of that, we have a blend control as well as a 2-band preamp. The blend control has a very weird implementation because it's almost a simulated blend control, as there are no pickups to blend between here, and we can model single and double pickup instruments. On top of that, there is a 2-band preamp, a bass and treble boost and cut, that allows us to kind of tailor the tone to our liking. There is no passive tone control, but that's what the treble control is for here, in essence. This isn't a traditional preamp, as everything is kind of all working together to give you this particular modeled tone. Before we talk about all the different bass tones that we can simulate, let's talk about the basic specs of this instrument. It is an almost Fender-esque build with an alder body painted in a black with a pearloid pickguard, a black pearl, and we have a maple neck with a rosewood fingerboard. These basses were produced in, I believe, between 2005 and 2007. So that's when rosewood was a lot more popular and they weren't using rosewood substitutes like Palfaro. So what we have here is a rosewood board, maple neck, 34-inch scale, 1.5-inch nut width, or I believe, 38 millimeters. Basically a jazz bass kind of neck profile. Up at the headstock, we have some neat tuners. The only other place I've seen tuners like this was on these Solar basses, and it's really neat to see them here. These tuning machines are very interesting because these are not half-inch tuners on a Fender-style instrument. Normally you see the half-inch tuner style, but we are seeing a 3/8 inch. 3/8. That's what we got up there. So if you're looking to replace these tuners, that's what you would get from Hipshot or wherever you would buy your tuners from. Not saying I'm going to mod this because I'm not. This is just a weird bass. Now, let's go ahead and turn this bass around real quick. Around back, we see, surprisingly, not much. There is a battery cavity here. It's a rather large battery cavity, and you may be thinking, okay, that's probably like an 18-volt circuit. No, this takes 6 AA batteries. What the heck is up with that? Double A's in a bass? 6 of them nonetheless, and that will give you, I believe, 10 to 12 hours of playtime. There's also an emergency 9-volt adapter that will give you, I think, only a few hours. It's recommended that you power this bass with the included power brick thing here. This is what powers the instrument. You can use a TRS cable and power the bass without any need for batteries. And this has a dual output as well. You have a 1/4 inch as well as an XLR to have maybe a stereo setup, have one go to a mix directly and the other go to an amp. A lot of possibilities here. Moving up the neck, we see a standard Fender-ish style 4-bolt neck attachment and a neck plate. Pretty standard. And then we see the back of this maple neck. Looks like this is a one-piece maple neck, which is pretty neat. And we see the back of the headstock where we see that this bass is made in Korea, back when Korean manufacturing was a lot more popular versus it's much more Indonesian-centric now. In regards to weight, this bass comes in at around 9.5 pounds, which is a little on the heavy side, but nothing back-breaking. Now you may be wondering, how much does the Line 6 Variax 700 cost? Brand new, I believe they sold for around $1,300 back in 2005 to 2007, which was rather pricey considering that you could get a USA Music Man Stingray for roughly around that price back then. But again, you know, this was the bass that could do it all. It can't. Now, on the used market, these can go anywhere from a few $100s to close to their brand new price. There's not that many of these floating around. There's also a 5-string model with the Variax 705. However, one in good condition with the included power brick and TRS cable would probably fetch a premium over one that was just the bass by itself. This bass also came with its own custom gig bag that had space for the power brick as well, so you didn't have to swap batteries mid-set or anything. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the specs and the rundown of the Line 6 Variax 700. Now I know you guys are wondering, what does this bass sound like? You guys know what you need to do. Go ahead and pinch that like button so my hand will turn back to normal. Thanks. So what we have at our disposal with the Line 6 Variax 700 are 24 presets, 24 different sounds, modeled after 24 iconic basses. Now, I don't have all 24 of those instruments handy, however, I do have a few rough examples of those, and we're going to do our best to compare the real thing to the modeled sound of the Line 6 Variax 700. Spoiler alert, these were only produced for 2 to 3 years, so that should tell you enough about whether or not these were highly successful with their sound modeling. I don't think it was really the jack of all trades that they wanted it to be. But anyways, let's begin with the jazz bass. On the rotary selector, it is the Vin-J model. That's the vintage jazz. So I have the whole manual up over there so I can tell you exactly what it's modeled after. The vintage jazz mode in its current setting is modeled after the 1961 jazz bass. Now, I don't have a 1961 jazz bass here, but I do have my Fujigen Gettysilla, which has 60s jazz spacing, and it's a jazz bass. So let's see if they're remotely comparable. First, I'm just going to mess around with the settings, and we're going to just start from a baseline and mess with the EQ and the blend knob to get our, I guess, most accurate representation, to my ears at least, to what a jazz bass would be. So here's with the EQ centered and the blend centered. That does not sound like a jazz bass, just straight up. Let's mess with the EQ a little bit. Let's boost the treble and boost the bass a little bit. Yeah, maybe that helped a little bit. Let's play with this blend control. So here. This is at the neck position. That does not sound like a jazz bass neck pickup. Let's go over to the bridge now. Keep in mind this is a 60s jazz, so it does not have the 70s position closer to the bridge. Well, there's no pickup, but you know what I mean. Anyways, here's the bridge pickup on our 60s jazz. Okay. So let's compare that with the real thing now. So here is an actual jazz bass with both pickups engaged. So the blend at 50%. what a jazz bass is supposed to sound like. Now let's check out the neck pickup. And here's the bridge pickup. So right off the bat, I can say that the middle position does not sound like a jazz bass at all. With the pickups soloed, you can kind of get a jazzy kind of tone, but still no go. Next, what we're going to do is push the volume control, and the LED here is going to turn from green to red, meaning we've engaged the second preset for this particular selection. For the Vin J selection, I believe it's a 1960 jazz with flat wound strings. I have rounds on here. These are MJC Ironworks nickel-plated stainless steel, 45 to 105. So let's see what they sound like as flats with the blend centered on our 1960 jazz bass. Interesting. It's kind of weird playing a bass with rounds and having a flattish tone come out of it, especially when these strings are relatively new. Okay, so let's play with the blend a little bit. Interesting, and let's pan over to the bridge pickup. Interesting. Let's move on to our next preset now, because there's quite a handful that we have to go through. Next is our Modern J, which in its current setting is modeled after the Jazz Bass Deluxe from 2004. Here's what that sounds like with the blend centered. So yeah, that doesn't sound like a jazz. Anyways, let's pan over to the neck pickup. And here's the bridge pickup. Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's emulating it, but not necessarily in the best manner. I find that in the three jazz basses that we've played thus far, it fails to truly emulate the mid-scoop that you get with the pickups in the center position, or the blend in the center. So kind of weird there. Anyways, let's go ahead and push our volume knob, and that's going to engage the second preset here, and that is a 1960s fretless jazz. This is modeled after like Jocko's jazz. So here is that with the blend centered. gonna boost the treble here, and we're gonna pan over to the bridge pickup. Am I Jocko now? Did it sound like Jocko's fretless? No. No, it did not. Oh, this is a weird and sad bass. It tries to do so much, yet accomplishes so little. What's next up here? What's next? Let's scroll down. Next, we get to pre-bass, which is a P-bass. I don't know why they didn't just say P-bass. Like, the person who wrote the owner's manual and whoever made the names for this, like, such dad sense of humor. I both love it and hate it. Oh, right. We're on the bridge pickup of a P-bass right now. Let's go ahead and center that blend control and center the EQ. So this is a 1963 P-bass with round wounds. That does not sound like a P-bass. I'm going to boost the treble and boost the bass and bring the blend maybe just a smidge forward. But does that actually P-bass? Let's see. I'm going to grab my Sire P5 that has the DiMarzio 60s P pickup. And that is quite the nice pickup there. It sounds just like an old school P-bass. Let's see how it compares. So here is our Sire P5 with the DiMarzio 60s P, tone at 100%. What's extra funny is all the basses thus far have been using the same-ish set of strings. They were all MJC Ironworks, nickel-plated stainless steel, gauges 45 to 105. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if those strings are still available, but they're great strings nonetheless, and yeah, so this does not sound like a P-bass. Like, it kind of does, but not really. It doesn't really have any of the attack or thump. It's just kind of sterile. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our next preset. Next, I'm going to press the volume knob, and that is going to engage a 60s P-bass with flat wounds. Here's what that sounds like. No. Yeah, not really. I don't have a P-bass with flats handy at the moment. I know, sacrilege. However, I don't think it sounds like a P-bass with flats. I've left the same pickup position that I did. It's kind of neck leaning, and I have the bass and treble boosted a little bit. So, yeah. Yeah, something about the attack as well as the top end just doesn't sit right. It's kind of in that weird uncanny valley where, you know, it sounds like a bass, but there's something off. Next is my favorite, the Manta setting. I'm going to go ahead and center the EQ, center the blend control, and this is supposed to be a 70s Music Man Stingray. A 1977 to be specific. I don't have one here, but I do have a Stingray Classic over there, so let's go ahead and see if we can make them sound remotely similar. Here is the Manta setting with the blend control centered as well as the EQ centered, both bass and treble. I'm going to boost the treble and the bass ever so slightly to maybe about 50%. Now let's go ahead and grab our Music Man Stingray Classic and see if they sound remotely similar. Yep, so definitely doesn't sound like a Stingray. Let's go ahead and press the volume control and engage the second preset for the Manta setting. And that is modeled after a modulus flea bass from 2003. Now, I don't have one of those. Now, that's another bass I don't have, so let's just listen to it. Yeah, it doesn't. No. There's just something off with the attack. Like, you're just not getting the oomph that you're putting in. It just sounds oddly molded, is the only way to describe it. But anyways, let's move on. Next is the clang setting, and that is modeled after a 1971 Rickenbacker 4001. I don't have one of those either, but I do have a 4003 back here, down there. So let's see if we can get a decent tone out of this. Here is the clank setting with the preamp centered as well as the blend control centered. So far, nothing. I'm going to crank the treble all the way, give it a little bit of a bass boost, and we're going to just ever so slightly pan towards the bridge pickup. Now let's grab our actual Rick and see if it remotely compares. So here is both pickups at 100%, basically the blend at center for the line 6, but on our Rick here. back off the neck pickup a little bit. Yeah, so not awful, but anyways, let's center the blend control one more time, center our EQ, and press our volume knob to engage the second clank setting, and that is a 1960s Rick with flat wounds. Interesting. So I'm noticing a trend. When you have the blend control centered, it really doesn't sound that great, but panning to either side gives you a much more authentic sound for that soloed pickup. That's what I found overall. With single pickup basses, however, it seems like you're out of luck, because this really doesn't do those that well either. Let's go ahead and move on to our next setting. Next is the hollow setting. Our first selection here is a 1960s Dan Electro Longhorn with round wound strings. Here's what that sounds like. And let's press our volume knob to engage the second setting, which is modeled after an old Hofner violin bass with flat wound strings. Okay, now we're starting to get into the realm of, man, these are sounding like keyboard patches. Yeah. We've come a long way in nearly 20 years. Again, this is from 2005 to 2007 that these were produced. This particular one coming from 2005, so 17 years have passed since this was brand new. And a lot of things have changed in regards to amp and bass modeling and tone shaping and stuff like that, so yeah. This has not aged well. It just fades off so unnaturally because it's trying to simulate the flat wound thing, but you know, your strings are like still ringing and you feel it in your hand, but it's like artificially killing the sound. It's so weird. Let's go ahead and move on to our next setting, Thump. The first selection of Thump is modeled after an old school Gibson Thunderbird with round wounds. Here's what that sounds like. I don't have a Gibson Thunderbird handy, but I do have an Epiphone Embassy that's Thunderbird-esque in its sound. Let's go ahead and see how they compare. So here's our embassy with the blend control centered, tone at 100%. Now let's press down our volume control and engage our second preset for thump, and that is an Epiphone EB2 hollow body with flat wounds. Here's what that sounds like. Now, I don't have one of those handy, so we'll just take its word for it, but I'm going to go ahead and pan over to the neck pickup and see if that fattens it up a little bit. That one's okay. For something that's trying to emulate a bass with flats and a hollow body, it's doing a decent enough job for that one. Let's move on to our next preset. This one's going to be fun. This is the modern preset. I'm just hearing a little bit of electronic interference noise. I don't know what's up with this particular preset, but this one is modeled after an MTD 535-24 from the early 2000s. I just so happen to have an MTD 535-24 back here, though it is a newer version. Here's what this sounds like with the blend control centered. Let's also do a comparison with the neck pickup soloed. Here's what my MTD sounds like with everything centered. Now let's blend over to the neck pickup. So that one's interesting as well. I mean, it has essences of that MTD tone, but still misses the mark entirely. Now let's press the volume control and engage the second modern selection, and that is a Warwick Thumb. I believe it's a mid-2000s Warwick. Here's what that sounds like. I don't have one handy, so just go with this. Yep. I don't know. Moving on to the next setting, we have Alchemy. So the first setting is supposed to be modeled after an Alembic Series 1. However, something is not right with this, as it sounds more like the 8-string, which is going to be the next setting. Those seem to work fine, but here's what this sounds like. Yep, so I don't have an Alembic Series 1 or an 8-string version of one either, so nothing to compare against there. Now let's press the volume control and engage the second preset for Alchemy, which is a Steinberger from 1982. Yeah, I have nothing to compare it against. Maybe it sounds like a Steinberger. The next couple of settings are actually some of my favorites because they're the most wacky. First is the 8 and 12 string setting, with the first, I believe, being the 8 string. This is a Hagstrom 8 string, a classic one. Here's what that sounds like. As you can see, that's a fun setting. It's something wacky, but it can also be achieved with like an octave or pedal, so no need to go out and buy a bass like this for such a thing. Now we're going to press our volume control and engage the second setting, which is a 12-string acoustic. Looks to be a hammer of sorts. What is this? Yeah, a hammer B12A. Let's see what that sounds like. Let's move on to our next setting. This is also an interesting one, Acoustic. The first preset is a regular acoustic, like, bass. I believe it's modeled after a Tacoma Thunder Chief. I'm not really a fan of acoustics that much, especially acoustic strings, so I don't have any of those here to compare against, but it sounds acoustic-y. Big shout out to AMP. This is the electric bass that sounds like an acoustic bass. The best of both worlds. Ho ho! Oh, we have fun. We have fun here. That's a weird one. Let's press the volume control and engage the upright tone. This is a fun one. That's just a weird one. I'm going to crank the bass on this, leave the treble at center, see if we can get this to sound a little fatter. I'm also going to bring the blend over to the neck pickup. I don't have an upright here, but I've played one before, and I think everyone knows what one sounds like. Not an upright. Not a replacement for an upright either. No. No. And the last setting, Synth. We have two wild synth settings. One is a vintage Moog, or whatever, and the other is a modern synth. Here is the vintage synth first. Harmonics are funny on this. There's also only a limit to the amount of notes you can play before you start getting cut off. Like, yeah, again, nothing a synth pedal couldn't do in 2021 nowadays. Let's check out our final setting, and that is the modern synth. What is this? Well, what is this? So here are my final thoughts on the Line 6 Variax bass. Don't buy one. Don't buy one. They're not great. It's a relic from an overly digitized time of the mid-early 2000s. This is like the Star Wars prequels of bass, where it's just like shoving computer-generated content down your throat. It does not do that great of a job of modeling a lot of those basses. It doesn't sound bad, but it's lacking a lot in terms of low-end punch. It's lacking a lot in terms of attack. It sounds very artificial in its attack versus, you know, the input that you're putting in. You definitely notice a discrepancy. But yeah, that's the Line 6 Variax for you. I'm not going to give this a rating, as you really can't buy these new, and they were only made for a couple of years, from 2005 to 2007, so I'm just glad it still works so I can make a video. Well, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure to like, subscribe, join our Discord channel, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about the Line 6 Variax 700 bass. Did it really do its job at modeling all those different basses accurately? No. But let me know what you think regardless. And as always, until we groove again.